Hey there, my name's Curtis Lucas and you're watching Empire Building. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about what is happening right now. We just had the FOMC meeting where the Federal Reserve hiked interest rates yet another 25 basis points, which is not something the market wasn't expecting. So there wasn't a whole lot really there. There were no surprises and the market took it in stride for the most part. Now, of course, some of the banks, not so much. Now, we'll get into that topic in just a moment, but first I want to get into this declaration of war against Bitcoin mining by the Biden administration and the White House. So, this document was released on Monday, May 2nd. The dam tax, making crypto miners pay for costs they impose on others. First heard about this through an article, but I decided as usual to go straight to the source and find out exactly what was being said. And fair warning, this thing, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm going to highlight a few parts. I'll leave a link down in the description. You can read this thing from beginning to end and become just as enraged as I was when I first read it. As many of you probably already know from this year's budget, they had tucked in there a little digital asset mining energy excise tax. And they're saying here is an example of the president's commitment to addressing both long-standing national challenges as well as emerging risks, in this case, the economic and environmental costs of current practices for mining crypto assets. Crypto mining for short. After a phase-in period, firms would face a tax equal to 30% of the cost of the electricity they use in crypto mining. That is incredibly punitive for these companies. As most of us who are investors in this space know, that would be absolutely devastating to their bottom line, making mining in the U.S. wholly uncompetitive on the worldwide stage. So it would drive miners out of the country, except for periods where the asset prices rise substantially enough to make it worth it again, which will make essentially mining far more unstable in this country. I'm Canadian, but in the United States, it would make it far more unstable on the load generators. So if you really want to do a lot of damage and make the industry that much more unpredictable, this is how you would do it. Which, again, much like many of the other things that are raised in this report or in this letter, indicate to me that what they're saying it's about isn't really what it's about. They say currently crypto mining firms do not have to pay for the full costs they impose on others in the form of local environmental pollution, higher energy prices, and the impacts of increased greenhouse gas emissions on the climate. So, obviously, there is no local pollution production as a result of mining Bitcoin. Bitcoin doesn't produce any emissions. It's fully electric. Much like any electric car doesn't produce any local emissions. It does produce them depending on the source of energy where it comes from, but that makes it no different than any other electrical device. The DAME tax encourages firms to start taking better account of the harms they impose on society, without really giving any proof of that. They go on to basically say that the mining is going to use all the power available and leave nothing for all the homes that need it or any other sources, and basically just a giant waste of energy. And more and more and more how it has negative spillovers on the environment, quality of life, and electricity grids where these firms locate across the country. Pollution from electricity generation falls disproportionately on low-income neighborhoods and communities of color. So apparently, Bitcoin mining, as it turns out, is also racist.
And of course, if you want to malign a technology, drugs is step one, right? Child abuse is probably step two, terrorism is step three. You might rearrange them depending on the proclivities of your government. But if you want to wrap up a nice big dollop of censorship, you're going to pick one of those three wrappings to deliver it to the sheep and tell them why this thing needs to be stopped.
At this point, it should become blatantly obvious that none of this is meant to be a nuanced conversation about the issues. They're taking a hard line on this, and it's a pretty extreme one. So, okay, what if, as many miners are doing, they commit to focusing on sourcing energy only from renewable and clean sources? What about that? Well, you're not off the hook either. The environmental impacts of crypto mining exist even when miners use existing clean power. For example, in the case of communities with hydropower, where crypto mining operations are often located, increased electricity consumption by crypto miners reduces the amount of clean power available for other uses, raising prices and increasing overall reliance on dirtier sources of electricity. So they don't care where you get your power from, you got to pay this tax. And then they go on basically to say that it's all bad, everything's terrible, there are no positive outcomes from this, it's a complete waste of time and energy, and basically we don't want it here, and we don't want it just leaving one area of the country and going to another. We just want it gone. Just gone. Just out of the country completely. So we need a national policy that will make sure that happens. There is so much wrong with this on so many levels that I cannot even begin to break it down. And as I mentioned, the fact that this is completely one-sided tells me that it's not even about the things that they're saying in this report or statement. For starters, it's been abundantly clear that Bitcoin mining in its current form, they reference a lot of issues that have been prominent in the early days when Bitcoin mining changed rapidly. The ASIC miners were evolving rapidly. They wouldn't last very long before they became obsolete. And with the volatile prices, crypto mining firms would pop up and then go out of business. But they were much, much smaller firms. They'd take up smaller real estate in existing buildings and retrofit them to just mine cryptocurrency as fast as they possibly can. And then when the prices plummeted, that load disappeared and it was somewhat unreliable. Much like what would happen if they enacted this tax. It would mean that no cryptocurrency miner, no Bitcoin miner, let's face it, that's really the bulk of what this is about, could be profitable during bear markets, which means they would be forced to shut down, most likely go out of business if they attempt to set up shop in the United States. But that's not going to stop them from attempting to set up during those bull markets that inevitably come. So this would have the opposite effect of what their claimed intent is. Today, Bitcoin mining is an incredible source of stability to national grids. In Texas, they understand this, and it has proven to be effective. And that's growing more and more. I recently, in the last video, I did an interview with TeraWolf, and they are partnered up with another Bitcoin mining company, private company, and operating a Bitcoin mining data center located on site of a thermonuclear power generation facility. Now, as it just so turns out, after I was doing some research on that power plant, I discovered that this power plant was running into a lot of financial difficulties in maintaining profitability. Basically, they couldn't operate because they didn't have enough of a steady load that they could rely on so they could maintain that operation at peak performance. If you can't rely on that demand being there, it can be difficult for these things to operate profitably. So they were requesting help assistance from the government in the form of subsidies. But with a Bitcoin miner on site, ready and willing to be the buyer of last resort for whatever power they can produce, and the ability to shut down when needed, that is a source of stability for the grid and means that the government would not need to provide that subsidy. This is so painfully obvious, and the fact that they couldn't even bother to acknowledge any of this makes it abundantly clear what their true objective is. Now, this is why it was a breath of fresh air when on my Empire Building Discord, which you can sign up down at Patreon, in the link in the description below, but somebody shared an article about the new Democratic presidential candidate, Robert F. Kennedy, who had a mouthful for this administration. As always, I skipped the article and went straight to the source of the tweets themselves. He says, cryptocurrencies, led by Bitcoin, along with other crypto technologies, are a major innovation engine. It is a mistake for the US government to hobble the industry and drive innovation elsewhere. Biden's proposed 30% tax on cryptocurrency mining is a bad idea. Yes, energy use is a concern, though somewhat overstated. But Bitcoin mining uses about the same as video games, and no one is calling for a ban on those. The environmental argument is a selective pretext to suppress anything that threatens elite power structures. Bitcoin, for example. I couldn't believe he actually called them out on that, because that's exactly what I've been saying. He goes on to say here, some advocate tight control of cryptocurrencies to prevent their use by criminals. But it isn't just criminals who want privacy. So do dissidents and ordinary citizens. Governments harass their enemies and crush dissident by controlling bank accounts and payment platforms. Until we restore trust in government, a distant prospect, we need cash and crypto to ensure freedom. Just as biodiverse ecosystem is a resilient ecosystem, so too will our economy be more resilient if it has a diverse ecology of currencies, not just a single, centrally controlled one. We are seeing today how fragile our over-centralized system is. This was a breath of fresh air, and I'm glad, honestly, that it's a Democrat nominee or candidate that's actually saying this. Finally, we can get somebody who's a true moderate. Now, I don't tend to make this my platform or show about politics, but I can definitely get behind a candidate like this. And again, having said that, there are also candidates on the Republican side who share views similar to his. And if we can just get a couple of moderates that can understand this issue for what it really is, and fine, if we want to talk about the issues of dirty consumption of energy, well, then why not have that conversation across the board? All industries. Let's solve that problem. But to say Bitcoin is the leading cause of this and it needs to be the one to be stomped down and as somehow that's going to solve the problem, no, it doesn't. So anyways, that's my rant for now. I was going to do this yesterday, but honestly, I was too mad. And I wasn't prepared to actually get my head clear on how I wanted to frame that argument. And then when I saw this tweet thread, it was perfect. I couldn't have said that better myself. Now, aside from that, obviously today with the Fed raising the target interest rate another 25 basis point, the market didn't quite respond too much, and also followed by yet another banking collapse that is happening right before our eyes. And Bitcoin has responded by surging up somewhat, but it does seem to be losing a little bit of steam here. I've been saying over my Discord for some time now that we're probably now that we've had this great big surge, we're due for either a correction or some sideways movement for the next little while. So I'm not looking for fireworks anytime soon. But again, like I said, my new strategy here is to simply sell covered calls, create that source of sort of revenue stream that I can use for further dollar cost averaging when opportunities present themselves. That's my strategy. And so far, it's been working perfectly. I cannot complain. And I'll talk more about that, but not in this video. It'll take too long. But the thing I wanted to highlight here was what people don't seem to be understanding. And I've been doing a lot of thinking about this and realized that I wasn't seeing it clearly either. To do with the level of inflation that we're seeing and the fact that despite the aggressive increases in interest rates, it hasn't done much to slow the economy down. Jobs are still strong. In fact, there's still relatively high vacancies and low unemployment. And the Fed seems to be hell-bent on trying to break that somehow, but it's not quite working. And they are, as I was, looking back to the 70s and thinking that this was somehow identical to that. And if they just did the same thing, they would have the same result. And that it was going to be necessary to see other things, other signals like unemployment start to increase before they know they've truly done their job. But what they don't seem to acknowledge, and they've never mentioned, was that there's a very big difference in the labor force and other economic factors between the 70s and now. The biggest, in my opinion, is baby boomers. What were the average age of baby boomers in the 70s? Well, they were in their 20s. So if you've got the largest population force that has moved through our economy as they have aged, whatever age the baby boomers are at that given time has a massive impact on how our economy responds. And in the 70s, they were in their 20s just entering the workforce. So yeah, that's anything that happens is going to have a massive impact on unemployment. But what's happening now today is they're retiring, and interest rates going up isn't going to change that. So they're leaving the workforce, and COVID expedited that. So yeah, it makes perfect sense that we have low unemployment despite interest rates being increased so greatly. And also that despite inflation, spending isn't really isn't being curtailed all that much. These are other factors that you have to consider. And this is why, like, expecting some sort of massive recession is something I realize is not necessarily a sure thing. Maybe a little bit of a slowdown. I mean, it's definitely put a pause on investment activities. But now on top of that, we have this new breakthrough in AI, which changes everything. It would not surprise me in the least if Cathie Wood ends up being the voice of reason in this scenario. And before long, because of the result, because of the effect of the increase of the restrictive policies that the Fed has put in place, the resulting bank failures, which also ratchet up that restrictive practices, lending practices. Banks are just not in a position to be out there lending money out. So yeah, that's really going to slow that kind of activity down. And then on top of that, we have AI just bursting onto the scene, which is going to drive costs down in a pretty fundamental way. But those things take time. So while the Fed is sitting here with its foot firmly placed on the brake, as hard as it possibly can, they're going to find inflation headed down much faster than they expected. And if they hold their foot on the brake for too long, which it seems they will, they're going to be finding themselves with the opposite problem before too long. Obviously, the timing on all this, I don't know. But it does seem to be the pattern that they're exhibiting. They were too late to stop with the quantitative easing. They were too late to begin hiking. And then they hiked too fast. And now they're holding them high for too long. They're just behind the ball the entire time. So it's something to keep an eye on. But at the same time, it's not something I'm prepared to try to anticipate and say, all right, now it's time to sell or anything like that. I do think that for the bulk of the next year, it's probably more likely a sideways market than anything else while we wait and see. I'm not expecting anything being particularly bearish, but I'm also not expecting fireworks and massive bull runs. And if that turns out to be true, then I should do quite well. But feels good to be back. Obviously, audio on this video should be a lot better than the last. I had bought this new microphone off of Amazon, which really, Amazon did me bad. Did me real bad on that one. One of the highest ratings on the site, and it was total garbage, complete trash. That's it. But I did manage to splurge and get something a lot more effective. So I hope you enjoy the new quality. And yeah, like I said, I'll be out here doing more regular videos as we progress. And I'm going to get out and do some more interviews with CEOs and other mining companies, see what everybody's been up to. And I am looking forward to getting in and doing some more deep dives on these companies and share with you what I've seen. Because a lot has changed since we've been doing these videos on a regular basis. So let's reestablish this and see what's what and what the new strategies are. And again, if you'd like to get more, head down to the description, click on the link, join up on Patreon, and we'll be able to converse daily. I'm on there all the time, and so is the rest of the community, made up of other investors with great ideas, and just really there to help make this experience just that much more enjoyable. That's all for this one. Now let's get back to empire building.